When I first arrived in the United States, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I was 20 years old, freshly arrived from France, and full of hope and excitement for the adventure that awaited me. I had always dreamed of exploring America, of experiencing life in a different country, and I thought being an au pair was the perfect opportunity. It promised a chance to immerse myself in the culture, improve my English, and most importantly, work with children, something I had always wanted to do. Coming from a small village near Paris, where everyone knew everyone's business, I found the idea of living in the US exhilarating. The thought of being on my own, in a country I had only seen in movies, was as liberating as it was terrifying. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I was eager. In a way, it felt like a rite of passage, my first step into adulthood and independence. My host family, the Josephs, seemed ideal. They lived in a quiet, upper-middle-class neighborhood in the suburbs, where the streets were lined with large houses, each with perfect manicured lawns. The kind of place where you expect to see perfectly behaved kids playing in their yards, PTA meetings happening at the local school, and the sound of distant lawn mowers on weekends. It was everything I had imagined America to be. When I first spoke to Mrs. Joseph, she was polite, warm, and spoke to me with such kindness. She asked all the right questions about my background, my experience with kids, and my reasons for becoming an au pair. She assured me that her two boys were well behaved and that I would have everything I needed to feel comfortable in their home. I felt relief wash over me. This was what I had worked so hard for, and it felt right. The day I arrived at the Joseph family's home, I remember feeling both nervous and excited. The house was everything I had imagined, a beautiful, modern home with a large backyard. The boys were polite, welcoming, and seemed like they would be easy to look after. Brandon, the younger boy, was 9, and Brock, his older brother, was 12. I quickly learned that Brock was typical for his age. He loved video games, was a bit lazy, but overall harmless. It was Brandon, though, that made me feel uneasy from the very beginning. Brandon's first words to me weren't what I expected from a child his age. He stared at me with wide eyes when I walked into the room, not speaking a word. The silence was uncomfortable, and his gaze made me feel like he was studying me, dissecting me in a way that was way beyond his years. I tried to break the tension by smiling, but he didn't smile back. He simply asked, "Are you the maid?" I remember laughing nervously, trying to brush off his odd question, but there was something about the way he said it that didn't sit right with me. It wasn't playful or innocent, it was almost as if he was testing me, gauging my reaction. I told him that I wasn't the maid, that I would be taking care of him and his brother while his parents were away at work. He didn't respond with the typical excitement or curiosity I would expect from a child, but rather just nodded and returned to his toy, not saying another word. At first, I thought it was just nerves, maybe he was shy. But as the days went on, I began to notice that Brandon wasn't like most children. He had an unsettling calmness about him, a coldness that I couldn't shake. He didn't smile much, and when he did, it was more like a grin than a joyful expression. It felt like a mask, and I couldn't figure out what he was hiding behind it. I'd catch him staring at me, his eyes following me around the house, always from a distance, as if he was studying my every move. I'd turn around to find him standing just behind me, not saying anything, just watching me. It wasn't until later that I realized he was peeking through cracks in doors, silently observing me without a sound. At first, I dismissed it as just a quirky behavior, maybe an indication of shyness or curiosity. But the more I thought about it, the more unsettling it became. I started locking my bedroom door at night, just as a precaution. After the thumbtack incident, I knew I couldn't just keep pretending everything was normal. The feeling of dread continued to linger over me. Every time I walked through the house, I felt like someone was watching me. Every corner, every shadow seemed to hide Brandon's piercing gaze, always just a little too focused on me, always watching, always waiting. The following days became a blur of unease. Brandon's behavior grew more erratic, and I could no longer explain it away as mere childhood antics. He was playing a game I didn't understand, and it terrified me. He started following me everywhere. I couldn't go into the kitchen without him suddenly appearing from behind a door frame, watching me like a hawk. Sometimes, I'd catch him standing just outside my room, peering through the crack in the door, waiting for me to notice him. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was normal for kids to be curious, but the feeling in my gut told me otherwise. I wasn't just paranoid. Something was off with Brandon. Something was very, very wrong. One day, as I was folding laundry in the living room, I heard a faint creak from behind me. I turned, but saw nothing. I brushed it off, assuming it was just the house settling. But then I saw it again, a shadow darting out of the corner of my eye. Brandon, standing motionless, watching me from the doorway. This time, I didn't speak. I just stared at him. "Are you gonna keep watching me?" I asked, trying to sound as calm as possible, even though my heart was pounding in my chest. He didn't answer. Instead, he just smiled at me, an eerie, unsettling grin that sent shivers down my spine. "I'm not watching you," he replied, his voice flat and emotionless. "You're just interesting." His words hung in the air, and I felt a chill run through me. It was as if he was testing me, probing my limits to see how far he could go. That night, after I had put the boys to bed, I locked my bedroom door. I didn't want to risk anything happening again. But sleep didn't come easy. Every noise, every little creak of the house made me jump. It felt like someone was walking around my room, just out of sight, but when I checked, nothing was there. I had never been so aware of every movement in the house, every creak, every soft whisper of the wind. I couldn't shake the feeling that Brandon was lurking just outside my door, waiting for the moment to strike. But when I checked, there was nothing. Nothing except the silence, which was worse than any noise could have been. It took me months to shake off the darkness that had engulfed my time with the Joseph family. The trauma of what had happened, of Brandon's cruelty, his manipulation, and ultimately his betrayal lingered in my mind long after I had left the US and returned to France. I tried to put it all behind me, to focus on rebuilding my life. But the fear, the feeling that something wasn't right, still gnawed at me. It was as if I had unknowingly become part of a much darker game, and I couldn't escape its reach. I returned to France, tried to get my life back on track. I enrolled in a university to further my studies in child psychology, something I had always wanted to do. I threw myself into my work, my studies, my friendships. But no matter how much I tried to move forward, a part of me couldn't let go of the shadows Brandon had cast over my life. It was during my second year back in France that I first saw him again. I had just returned from a long day of classes and was heading home when I noticed something strange. My phone buzzed in my pocket as I stepped off the train, and when I checked it, there was a message from an unknown number. The message was brief, just a few words. "You can't escape me." I felt my blood freeze. The message was simple, but its implications were horrifying. Who could it be? At first, I thought it might be a prank, someone from my old au pair group messing with me. But the feeling in my gut told me it wasn't a joke. I didn't know how Brandon had found me again, but something deep inside me knew it was him. I immediately blocked the number and told myself I wouldn't give in to fear. I tried to forget about it, but the unease followed me. Every time I was alone at home, I thought I heard something outside my window, footsteps in the hallway. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head. After all, I had moved far away from the US, I was living in a completely different country. Why would Brandon come all this way? But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was as though his presence was still lingering over me, no matter how far I ran. The realization hit me like a freight train. Sebi wasn't just some random guy. He had known about my life, my routines, my past. Everything about him was a calculated move, and I had walked right into it, blindly trusting him. The messages, the strange coincidences, the fact that he knew personal details about my life, none of it had been chance. I told Nicholas everything. I explained how I had met Sebi at the bar, how we had connected so easily, how everything had seemed perfect at first. But now, it all felt like a web he had carefully spun, drawing me in with promises of a good time, companionship, and safety. And all the while, he had been stalking me, collecting information, preparing for something I couldn't even begin to comprehend. After I had confronted him about the photo of my hometown in his room, I had tried to push the thought aside, but it had never truly left me. It stayed with me, gnawing at the back of my mind, keeping me up at night. Now, seeing his name attached to old Instagram posts, it became clear. Sebi wasn't who he had pretended to be. And worse, I wasn't sure if he had always been this person, or if something dark had transformed him. I felt a sense of dread overwhelm me as I thought about the lengths he had gone to, the effort he put into tracking me, observing me, until the time was right for him to strike. I began to wonder how many others he had done this to, how many lives he had ruined before mine. Had he done this with other women? Had he manipulated and controlled them the way he had manipulated me? I felt sick. I felt used, and worse, I felt trapped in a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. Nicholas and I decided to take action. We started by going to the police. I showed them the screenshots from Sebi's phone, the notes, the disturbing messages, and the photo of my driver's license. I explained everything, hoping for some sort of intervention. But once again, the police didn't take me seriously. They brushed it off, calling it unfounded concern and potential paranoia. Without tangible proof, they weren't able to do anything. It was infuriating. How could they not understand that this man was stalking me, was violating my privacy, and potentially putting me in danger? As the days passed, the messages from Seba became more aggressive. He started sending long rants, telling me how he had been watching me for months, how he had known I was the one. He said things like, "You can't escape me, and I will make you mine, whether you want it or not." These messages filled my inbox, and each one felt like a blow to my sanity. I was terrified. And worse, I knew he wasn't going to stop. I could feel his presence creeping closer every day. He had been here before. He had been right outside my door in the US, and now, it seemed like he was getting closer to me here in France. I decided to take more drastic measures. I moved to a different apartment. I changed my phone number again, and I deleted all my social media accounts. I tried to erase every trace of myself from the internet, but it didn't seem to matter. He still knew where I was. He still reached out to me through fake numbers, through private messages, through new accounts. It was like he had an unshakable grip on me, and no matter how hard I fought back, he always seemed to be one step ahead. One night, I received an anonymous email. The subject line read, "You're not as safe as you think." Inside, there was a single sentence, "I know where you live, and I know what you're doing. I'll be watching." The email was followed by a blurry picture of me leaving my apartment building, something that had been taken just a few hours earlier. My blood ran cold. I realized, then, that this had gone too far. This was no longer just some creepy guy, this was a predator who had carefully studied me, tracked me down, and was now making his move. He wasn't going to let me go. The terror of not knowing when he would show up at my door, when I would be faced with the nightmare I had spent months trying to escape, began to eat at me. I couldn't stay locked up in my apartment forever. I needed help, real help. I had reached my breaking point. I couldn't keep living in fear, constantly looking over my shoulder, afraid to leave my apartment. It felt like I was suffocating, and it was affecting my health, my mental well-being. Every phone call, every knock on the door, every anonymous message sent me spiraling into a panic. It was time to confront Seba. I knew I had to face him head-on, to end this once and for all. I couldn't keep running, couldn't keep hiding. With Nicholas by my side, we began to make a plan. The first step was simple, I would confront Seba, meet him in person. I had to do it. He needed to see that I wasn't going to be controlled by him anymore, that I wasn't going to cower in fear. We decided to meet him at a public place somewhere safe, surrounded by people, where I could escape if necessary. I didn't trust him, and I had no idea what his true intentions were. But one thing I knew for sure, I wasn't going to let him ruin my life any longer. I arranged the meeting. I told Seba that I wanted to talk, to clear the air. He eagerly agreed, his excitement apparent in his messages. I told him to meet me at a cafe near my apartment. I arrived early, my heart pounding in my chest, but I was determined. I couldn't let fear control me any longer. As I waited for him to show up, I watched the crowd around me, searching for any sign of him. I didn't know what I would do when I saw him, but I had to be ready. I had to face him, look him in the eye, and tell him that this was over. Then, I saw him. He walked into the cafe with a confident stride, his eyes scanning the room, and then they landed on me. I couldn't believe it. There he was, standing before me, the same Sebi I had once trusted, the same man who had infiltrated my life, my memories, my dreams. He smiled when he saw me, that same smile I had once found charming. But now, it was unsettling, twisted, like a mask hiding something much darker underneath. I stood up, trying to control my trembling hands. I couldn't show him how afraid I was, not now. Sebi walked over to me, and as he sat down, he said, "I've been waiting for this moment for so long, you know? I always knew you'd come around." His words made my blood run cold. He was unhinged, completely disconnected from reality. I didn't know what to say to him. My mind raced with thoughts of how to get away from him, how to escape this nightmare. "You don't have to be afraid anymore," Sebi said. "You're mine now. We were meant to be together. I knew it the moment I saw you." The words sent shivers down my spine. I could feel his control tightening around me, trying to manipulate me into submission. He wasn't going to stop, not now, not ever. I could see it in his eyes, the obsession, the madness. But I refused to back down. "I'm not yours," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "I'll never be yours. Leave me alone, Sebi. You've already ruined my life enough. I'm done with you." For a split second, there was a flash of anger in his eyes, but it quickly faded into something almost like amusement. "You don't get it, do you?" he said, leaning forward. "This isn't over. It's only just begun." The weight of his words hit me like a ton of bricks, but I wasn't going to let him have the satisfaction of seeing my fear. I stood up and walked away, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't look back. I ran, and this time, I wasn't running from the fear. I was running toward freedom. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, but it was also the most empowering. I left him behind. I escaped him. And in that moment, I knew I was finally free. The terror, the unease, it all started to fade away. I moved on with my life. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. Even after I thought I had escaped Sebi's clutches, the aftermath lingered. The next few weeks were a blur of paranoia, sleepless nights, and constant unease. Despite the fact that I had physically removed myself from the situation, mentally, I was still trapped. Every knock at my door, every phone call from an unknown number, sent me spiraling back into a state of fear. I couldn't shake the feeling that Sebi was out there, watching me. He had made it clear during our encounter that he wouldn't give up easily. He'd become obsessed with me, and I had become the object of that obsession. That kind of devotion, however twisted, wasn't something you could just walk away from. The worst part was that, as much as I wanted to believe it was over, the little signs still lingered. One afternoon, As I was walking through a quiet part of the city, I saw a figure across the street. It was a man walking briskly, his gaze fixed straight ahead. Something about his posture felt too familiar. My heart skipped a beat. I froze, my pulse racing. I couldn't even bring myself to look directly at him, but the feeling of being watched was undeniable. He crossed the street without so much as a glance in my direction, but I couldn't shake the sense of recognition. Could it be Seba? Was it just my mind playing tricks on me? I walked quickly, my hands trembling as I pulled my phone from my bag. I checked the map, checked the time, checked anything to distract myself from the sickening feeling crawling up my spine. I told myself it wasn't him. It couldn't be. But my gut told me something was wrong. I couldn't trust myself anymore. Later that evening, the anxiety overwhelmed me. I couldn't get rid of the thought that Seba was still out there, lurking somewhere, waiting for the right moment to strike again. His obsession wasn't just something he could let go of, it was like a part of him, and once someone like him fixates, they don't stop. I took extra precautions. I installed more locks on the doors and windows, changed my routine, and stayed in more often. I didn't feel safe anywhere. Everywhere I went, I imagined him lurking around the corner, following me, tracking my every move. Every familiar street, every face, became a potential threat. But despite all my efforts to stay hidden, I couldn't stop wondering, was it over? Had I truly gotten away from him? The fear was always there, gnawing at me, never letting me feel completely safe. I had to accept the truth. The psychological scars of what had happened wouldn't fade easily. I couldn't just move on. It would take time. It would take healing. Then, one day, I got a message that shook me to my core. It was from an anonymous email address, one I didn't recognize. My heart stopped when I saw the subject line, "I haven't forgotten you." The email itself was simple, just a few lines, "You're not as safe as you think. I know what you're doing." I couldn't breathe. It was the same feeling I had when I first found out Seba had been tracking me, utter dread. I knew then that it wasn't over. That gut-wrenching feeling told me it was him. He had found me again, and he wasn't letting go. I couldn't let this go on any longer. The fear, the panic, it was eating away at me, and I couldn't keep living like this. I had to confront him. I had to find a way to make it stop for good. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I contacted the police again, but I knew that they might not be able to do much without concrete evidence. This time, I had something more to go on: an anonymous email, a trail, and the knowledge that Seba had been lurking around for months. The first thing I did was gather every single message, every single piece of information I had about him: his photos, his messages, his phone records, everything I could remember about our encounters. It was all there. He had been manipulating me from the very start. But now I had proof, and I wasn't going to let him slip through my fingers again. With Nicholas by my side, we began to gather our resources. I talked to the police, showed them everything I had, and this time, they took me seriously. They traced the email addresses back to Seba's known IP address. The investigation began. As the days passed, I stayed inside more than ever, keeping to my apartment, never leaving unless I had to. I was still terrified, but I was also determined. I wasn't going to be the victim anymore. I wasn't going to let him control my life from the shadows. It wasn't long before I started seeing strange things. At night, I would hear footsteps outside my apartment, faint but unmistakable. I would peer out the window and see nothing. I'd check the security footage, only to find the cameras showing no one. But the feeling lingered. The sense of being watched. Then, one night, I heard a knock on my door. It wasn't an ordinary knock. It was sharp, insistent, and it echoed through the silence of my apartment. I felt a chill run through me. I didn't answer. My heart was pounding in my chest as I backed away from the door. The knocking continued. I grabbed my phone and called Nicholas, whispering that I thought Sebi had found me. He was there in a flash, and we waited. The knocking stopped. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The next morning, I received another message. It was brief, just a few words, "I'm closer than you think." I was on edge, but I couldn't let him intimidate me anymore. A few days later, Nicholas and I decided to make a move. We would confront him, finally put an end to this madness. We knew Sebi would eventually show up. It was only a matter of time before he came for me, and I wasn't going to sit around waiting to be caught off guard again. The confrontation took place in an isolated park in the early evening. I had lured him there with a carefully crafted message, acting like I was ready to meet with him, to talk. But this time, I wasn't going to be a passive participant in his twisted game. When Sebi showed up, he looked exactly the same as he always had, calm, composed, but with that unsettling air of someone who had no limits. His eyes met mine, and for a brief moment, I saw the same obsession there, the same glint of madness I had seen in his eyes before. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I stood tall, confronting him with the same fury that had been building up inside me for months. "You've ruined enough of my life," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was racing. "But this ends now." For a moment, there was nothing but silence between us. Sebi didn't respond. His face didn't change. But I could see the gears turning in his mind, his eyes narrowing. It was like he was calculating his next move, trying to figure out how to regain control. I didn't give him the chance. With one swift movement, I pulled out my phone, showing him the evidence I had gathered: the police reports, the emails, the photos. I had everything. He couldn't deny it anymore. "You're going to be arrested," I said, not giving him a chance to speak. "It's over." For the first time in what felt like forever, I saw something in Sebi's eyes that wasn't just obsession. It was fear. And in that moment, I knew I had won. The police arrived shortly after. They took him away, and I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was finally over. I still think about Sebi sometimes. The fear never really goes away, but I've learned to live with it. What I went through was horrifying, but it taught me something valuable: to trust my instincts and never let anyone, no matter how charming, manipulate me into feeling small or powerless. I don't know what became of Sebi, but I know he won't hurt anyone else. And that, in the end, is all that matters.